1939 was a watershed year in the history of movie making. Some of the greatest movies of all time were filmed that year, including The Wizard of Oz, the first movie to be filmed in color. Others, such as Stagecoach, Wuthering Heights, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, became legendary films that thrust many of Hollywood's biggest stars into the spotlight, including John Wayne, Bette Davis, Henry Fonda, Jimmy Stewart, Laurence Olivier, and Jimmy Cagney. Of all the great movies of that year, probably the greatest of all was Gone with the Wind. Based on the best-selling novel written by Margaret Mitchell, the movie opened in December of 1939 to tremendous fanfare.
Any good movie starts from a good source, and our source, of course, was Margaret Mitchell's fantastic Pulitzer Prize-winning book. The movie is important on so many levels because it is, of course, mainly a story of survival. And it's a story also of how different cultures related to each other during the Civil War. The main importance of the movie to American culture is how times have changed, because it does reflect the attitudes between races during the Civil War. And then I think people know full well the attitudes between races when the film was being made. There was horrendous segregation at that time. There's a story that was told to me by Lenny Blewett, who was one of the African-American extras on the film, and his mother worked for Humphrey Bogart. Mm-hmm. And because of that, he got to meet many celebrities, one of which was Clark Gable. And because of his friendship with Gable, he was given a role of one of the slaves in the film. And the first day of filming, Lenny was just shocked to discover that there were segregated bathroom facilities for whites and for African Americans. And in an offhand conversation, he mentioned to Gable about this, and Gable was just incensed. And he walked back to Selznick's office, which was about 7 blocks away, and walked past his secretary directly into Selznick's office and told him that if the bathrooms weren't changed, if the situation wasn't improved, that by the time he walked back, that he was going to go home. He would not return to the picture. And of course, by the time he got back to the set, the colored only or for whites only signs were removed, and everybody was treated as equals, as it should have been.
The year prior to the movie's premiere saw tremendous public interest. Fans clamored for details about the movie and insisted certain actors be included. It was generally recognized by most people that Clark Gable was perfect for the role of Rhett Butler. For the role of Scarlett O'Hara, David O. Selznick, the film's producer, devised a brilliant marketing idea for the movie by holding a national casting call for the role in the months before filming. Thousands of women applied for the role, and several were screen tested. It wasn't until filming began in January of 1939 that Mr. Selznick selected Vivien Leigh, a British actress, to play the role of Scarlett.
Well, as soon as I knew that I had enough credits to graduate from school, I went directly to California because I wanted to make enough money to buy my mother a house. And really the only thing I had going for me was that I was so naive that I didn't recognize rejection. So at that time, Universal had a program where they would train people. So I thought, well, if I could go to Universal, they would train me to be an actor. And I would go, they would say to me, well, not today, which meant in my way of thinking, I could go back tomorrow. So I would go back the next day, and it was never, not today, not today. Well, I think I wore them out. So I finally snagged a job sweeping hair in the hairdressing department. And I was making $76.60 a week, $76.60 every week, and I was managing to save money. But one day my boss called me and he says, Tumblin, he said, were you combing on the wigs last night? Which in fact I had been. And so I admitted to him, and he said, well, do you know who that was, who that wig belonged to? And he said, well, that's Debbie Reynolds, who at that time was the #1 star in America. And he told me, he said, well, she liked it and wants to know if you'll go up to her house and comb her wig for her. So I went up there. I had never ridden a limousine before. She sent her limousine after me. I sat up front with the driver because I thought it'd be rude to leave him up there all by himself. And after I got through combing her wig, she gave me $200, which was really 3 weeks' work. And then she said, well, do you mind if I tell my other friends about you? And some of her other friends were people like Marilyn Monroe and the Gabor sisters and Rhonda Fleming and Arlene Dahl, who were big stars at that time. So I started making really good money while keeping my day job. And then I decided to keep my day job, but then after a while I decided to quit it. And I went up to the big boss's office, and he didn't want to lose me. And so they started training me to be a hairdresser, which is what I really wanted to be. And 3 years later, I was head of the department. I really don't seek things out. They find me. And to date, we have a little over 300,000 pieces that we've managed to find. Well, the collection started when I was working at Universal Studios, and I was doing some research at Western Costume, who had created the original costumes for the film. And I saw this dress lying on the floor, and I thought, well, you know, what a shame. And I went over to pick it up, and about that time a docent walked by and said, you know, don't bother with that, we're going to be throwing it away anyway. So I thought, well, what a shame. And I offered to buy it. They told me it would be $20, so I bought it for $20. And that's how the collection started. The one that comes to mind, of course, is Hattie McDaniel's script. And there's quite a story behind that, because if you look at the script, you'll see a little watermark that was left by a glass on the cover. And I was told by Hattie's great-great-nephew that every day after work, Hattie would have a nice, great, big shot glass of Jack Daniels. And she'd sit in the chair and she'd put it on that script. And so it kind of tells a story in itself that she must have had a lot of shot glasses of Jack Daniels.
The movie swept the country by storm. It is estimated that close to 1 million people came to Atlanta for the movie's premiere at Lowe's Theater on December 15, 1939. Almost all the cast was on hand, and Atlanta shut down for 3 days of celebration. A ticket to the premiere cost $10, an unheard-of price for a movie at the time. Following its premiere, the movie opened in different locations around the country, almost like a traveling show. This was due to the nature of the agreement between Mr. Selznick and MGM Studios, who owned the rights to Clark Gable. As part of the agreement to release Gable to Selznick, MGM insisted on having control of the opening of the film and took half of its profits. The movie opened in Orlando in late January of 1940. Simply put, it was a movie premiere like no other in our history. Countless newspaper articles covered the movie from all angles. Many advertisers listed their items as either something reminiscent of the movie, like furniture or draperies, or something named from the movie, such as the Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler drinks offered at various nightclubs. All of Central Florida was consumed by the movie, and it is estimated that in the 18 days the movie showed in Orlando, over 22,000 people saw it. Only 36,000 people lived in the city at the time. In 1940, a typical movie ticket cost 25 cents. At the Orlando premiere of Gone with the Wind, the ticket price was $1. This is the equivalent to paying $40 for a single movie ticket in today's dollars. After its incredible opening here, the movie continued to premiere throughout the rest of the nation. In 1941, it was released to theaters across the nation, the first of many releases of the movie. Research here at the History Center has found that the movie's release in Orlando was not met with universal fanfare. In the still segregated Orlando of the 1940s, Gone with the Wind didn't premiere in any of the African-American movie houses in the area until 1941. Reception of the movie was mixed, as many in the audience didn't agree with the general portrayal of the African Americans in the movie and considered the characters simple and ignorant.
Well, I think it's perhaps the best feeling in the world is to be able to share with people, which is why I started collecting to begin with. You know, I was always taught to share, and thanks to wonderful museums like the Orange County Regional History Center, I'm able to do that. And it's just the best feeling in the world, particularly if you could sort of stand in the background and watch people enjoy what you've brought them. Best feeling in the world. I want them to leave with a lot of things. I guess I want them to, of course, appreciate the costumes, that they've lasted this long. I want them to get a sense of history. Also how the film relates to Orlando and the Orlando association with it. I want them to learn about movie making. I want them to learn a lot about how people were treated a lot differently, particularly the African Americans. They weren't really treated with a lot of respect. And I want them to learn about that. I want them also to leave with a sense of happiness. Just everybody interprets it differently. I just want them to be happy once they walk out the door and say, you know what, thanks, Jim, for sharing.
Even today, Gone with the Wind stirs emotions. As we commemorate the movie's 75th anniversary, we know that it has taken its place as one of the most enduring and loved movies of all time. It certainly played a role in shaping our cultural history. And even today, everyone recognizes Rhett Butler's immortal line, "Frankly, my dear,